It's really interesting because for the past several years, we've seen the urban areas do so well and the rural areas not do so well. And this pandemic has just flipped that on its head.
Flipped it. Yeah. I tell you what, it's 12:31. Let's go ahead and get the show started. I need to publicly thank Charity Miller, who is our tech person and has figured out a bunch of things here. So thank you, Charity. And Melissa Moore is with us. And not only is she in the class, but she's working with the whole program here. So between the two of them, wow, I really appreciate it. We are so pleased to have with us today Mr. Wit Tuttle. He's the Executive Director of Visit North Carolina and is the Vice President of the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. Mr. Tuttle, how many years have you been in this position now? I should know that, but I don't.
Yeah, I've been the director for about 6 years. Been with the office for 14.
14. He has done a fantastic job. When I think of somebody like Mr. Tuttle, not only does he have to be a good manager of people, hiring and motivating the right people, yeah, and be a great marketer, but he has to handle all of that weird politics that seems to constantly be going on in Raleigh. And the politics have been really withering in the last 3 or 4 years. And I have to say, he's just done a masterful job of keeping the hospitality industry out of the dirty politics and on point in what we need to be doing. He's really done a good job. And of course, it is tough for me to say all of these wonderful things as a University of Georgia undergrad. It is tough for me to say all of this because Mr. Tuttle got his undergrad at the University of Florida, all right? But in spite of that, he is a great guy who's done a great job. We like to zing each other. So Mr. Tuttle, at this point, I will hush up. And I do need to say Florida's going to beat Georgia this year, so I have to be pretty nice to him. But at any rate, I will hush up at this point. And Mr. Tuttle, welcome. We're happy to have you with us at Appalachian State today.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here. Dr. Clark, it's a pleasure to be here. It's great to see Wright Tilley there in the audience as well. I wasn't sure he was a member of your class, but he's a super guy. Just so happens to be another Gator, but runs the Watauga and the Boone tourism offices and does an amazing job there locally. So happy to see you guys. Thanks. I'm here. I'm going to talk about what we do in the state's tourism office, how we function, what's going on, that kind of stuff. If anybody has a question, just pop it in the chat or interrupt me. Be available at the end for questions. As always, if you ever need to have a question about our office, we're really open and try and be as public as possible. My email is wit, W-I-T, @visitnc.com. It's hopefully an easy email address to get to. So I am going to put up a PowerPoint, so I probably won't be able to see if you have any questions, but Dr. Clark, you can just stop me if anybody wants to ask anything. So I'll talk about what we do. So as Dr. Clark said, we are the state's tourism marketing office. We're actually part of the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina. And that was actually spun off from the North Carolina Department of Commerce. So essentially what we do is try and promote economic development in the state through all different ways. The most popular way we do it is business recruitment. And that's not my department, somebody else's. But that's when you hear that Amazon is, going to bring 5,000 jobs. It's those guys that try and go out and recruit them. We also have groups that work on businesses starting up to help them start up. We have groups that help existing industry expand through things like export assistance and other ways of growing. And then, of course, we have tourism development. Tourism is part of economic development. So it's oftentimes people think of it as something else, but it really is, because tourism is about jobs and revenue. And so our job is to try and get more people to come here and spend money, basically. And the way we do that, our goal is to unify and lead the state in positioning North Carolina as a preferred destination for travel, film, sports events, things like that. So every area in the state has a local tourism office. As I mentioned, Wright Tilly is on the call here today. That represents an area, usually counties, sometimes it's municipalities, but every place in the state essentially has one of those organizations leading it. And they do a great job. And what we try and do is help them amplify their voice. I always like to say we're really just an amplifier. We try and find ways in which they can partner together to get North Carolina's message out there, to get people from throughout the Southeast to come to North Carolina as opposed to Myrtle Beach or Savannah or Tennessee or places like that. So that's really our goal and what we do. Are we successful at it? Well, the state in 2019, we had $26.7 billion in visitor spending, more than 250,000 jobs, billions in revenue that tourism brought into the state. And it's interesting, we often, when I deal with politicians and try and get funding for tourism, I have to kind of explain to them what life would look like without tourism. And it's always been really hard for people to get that concept. But I think if there's one silver lining to the COVID situation is we see now what life is like without tourism, and it's not a pretty picture. I do like to remind people that everyone thinks of tourism as just being hotels and attractions and restaurants, and that's the industry, but that's not really the full impact of the industry. Tourism has an impact across all different assets of North Carolina's economy, because tourism businesses, they need insurance, they deal with banks, they have cleaners, they use energy, power, other business services. So we really impact about 21 different market segments in the state, and our overall impact's closer to $50 billion as an industry. Now that was of 2019. We're not going to be back there, I don't think, for a couple of years. But the state tourism office, who are we and what we do? Well, as I said, every county has a local tourism office, and we work with all those local tourism offices to bring people to North Carolina. We work with them. They load information actually into our website. We have a website called visitnc.com, and that's where people can come and get information on the state. And I have a staff of 12, so I don't know what's going on in every single county in the state. So we rely on those local partners to load information on their attractions, on restaurants, on special events and festivals and things like that into our website to make it a more comprehensive data source. Tourism is a big business. It's also an incredibly competitive business. We rank as one of the lowest budgeted state tourism offices in the Southeast. Our competitors have more money than we do. But fortunately, we have an amazing product, and that wins out in the end. We are the 6th most visited state in the country, and we're real proud of that. And where are those visitors coming from? Well, about 40% of them are coming from North Carolina, in-state business. That's our largest slice of the pie there. And then, it's contiguous states, and then it moves out further and further away. So you can see that's the biggest slice of the pie, but the majority of the pie is out-of-state visitors. And another important fact is, how much do these people spend? Well, if you look at those cones on the left, that's for the state overall, and the dark blue one is how much non-residents, that's total spending. The red one is how much residents spend, and the aqua one is the last one is how much non-residents spend. So you can see there that non-residents spend more, so they're what we call more valuable visitor to us. They bring more economic impact to them. But because this is the largest slice of the pie is North Carolina, most of those local tourism offices throughout the state focus on getting those in-state, those residents to come and visit. So at the state office, what we try and do is find effective ways for them to spend their money, what little money they budget for out-of-state people, to get them to come from out of state. We do that through cooperative advertising. So we run a list every year. It's about a $3 million program of cooperative ads where we'll go in and we'll buy a big section of advertising, and we'll have partners come in and sort of sublet space in those ads for us. And that way we have unified North Carolina sections. And we do it in print, but mostly we do it in digital Digital marketing is the way to go these days. So many people are on their devices. It's where they research travel. It's where they talk about travel. And unfortunately, a lot of these digital advertising opportunities have minimums that many of our local tourism offices can't cover. So if we can go into, say, Bid Select or TripAdvisor, Sojourn, and they have a $50,000 minimum buy, that would be out of the range for a lot of our local tourism offices. But if we can go in there and cover that buy and then get 5 or 6 tourism offices to come in at $5,000 or $7,000, they can do this digital ads they might not be able to do before. So that's really what we do. Over here on the right is an example of a co-op ad. We also do cooperative marketing to put out a travel guide every year for the state. We work with UNCTV. If you've ever seen the program North Carolina Weekend, we underwrite that because that gets the residents to know about the state. We work with the Association of Broadcasters, with the Print Association. Here's a good idea of a typical co-op ad for us. I believe this was in Outdoor Magazine. So of course we'll focus on the state with a big branded message, and then we will let the partners talk about what they've got as well, all sort of under one umbrella. That kind of stuff drives people to our website, visitnc.com. It gets about 7.5 million people every year to come to it, where they can learn about things. They can drill down to partner sites, to places like the local tourism offices sites. They can also go directly to the partners to book hotels, attractions, things like that. So you might say, how do we measure what we do? And as Dr. Clark talked about earlier, one of my jobs is going before the state's legislature and sort of justifying our existence and showing that that we're actually doing things that help make people come. One of the things I think that shows value is where we get partner investments. So as you can see, we have about a $4.7 million marketing budget. We get partners to contribute about another 2.1 million, which brings it up to almost $7 million advertising buy. And then because we're buying $7 million worth of advertising, we get a lot of in-kind value from the media to expand that out to where we take what was originally a $4.7 million budget and we can buy about $13.5 million worth of advertising. So that partner support, I think, really shows that people are engaged in our programs. In 2019, we had 164 different partners buy into our co-op program. They represented 70 of the state's 100 counties. We also try and look at tier 1 and tier 2 partners. The Department of Commerce has a tiering system, and counties are either tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. Tier 3 counties, their economies are the best. The top 20 counties in the state are tier 3. The next 40 are tier 2, and then the worst 20 economies in the state are tier 1. So we try and put a special emphasis on helping those tier 1 and tier 2 communities by having opportunities that they can participate in. So that's our co-op. That's one way in which we show the results of our work. Another way we show is through survey research and data. This is a program. There's a group called I forgot their name. One of our research groups does a study every year on travel, thing called a halo effect. And so what they do is they ask people several questions, and they ask whether they've seen a tourism ad or not. And one of the interesting things I think that shows really that tourism is economic development is they ask people, do you think North Carolina is a good place to start a business? It's not a travel or a tourism question. It's an economic business development question. And it's interesting that people who have seen one of our ads are 20% more likely to say, yeah, North Carolina is a good place to start a business. So it shows that even though we're going out with a leisure tourism message, it's having an impact on business development. And the beauty of it is our state backs it up, because if people have seen an ad and they've come to the state, they're 61% more likely to say North Carolina is a good place to start a business. So that's a really good way to show, but I think the best way we show whether our advertising works or not and how it's working is a program called Arrivalist. Arrivalist basically is one of those sneaky phone data companies that takes your phone data and tells us where you are if you've seen one of our ads. So you can see the red dots are the locations that people were in when they saw a Visit NC digital ad or they went to our website. The blue dots are where they came in North Carolina after they saw our ads. So through this technology, we can tell that people outside the state are seeing our ads and then visiting. We really thought that was kind of the holy grail of tourism marketing, because it's really tough if you're not doing an attraction to be able to tell how much of our ads work, who's coming, where are they coming from. This really shows us that. Now, we went to the legislature and showed them that. They were not impressed, as usual. One of the biggest things I hear from legislators is, well, they would have come anyway. You know, yeah, they went to your website, but they probably would have come anyway. You know, everybody knows North Carolina is a great place to come. So we were fortunate to work with this company, Arrivalist, to develop a new product that we just started showing last year. It's called A3, Arrivalist A3. And it's really interesting because what they do is they take a group, a control group, and it's typically a couple million people. And they have the exact same demographics and psychographics as a target group, which is another couple million people. The only difference between these two groups is that one, the target group has seen our ads. The other group hasn't. And so that other group, the control group, is really what those legislators were talking about. If we didn't do any advertising, 15 out of 1,000 people would come to North Carolina. So that's good, and that's nice. And some of them are probably seeing print ads that we can't measure, or other ways of finding out about North Carolina. But if we advertise to them and they get to see the ad, then almost 23.3 people out of 1,000 come. So that difference, that gap there, is really what we call our arrival lift. That's people that we can basically say the only difference between these two people is that they saw our ads. So our ads are working, and they're bringing in billions of dollars in spending. So the state is spending about $11 million on us every year, and we're bringing in billions of dollars in additional spending with the advertising. So that's kind of how we justify our existence and what we do. And now what I've told you from the start until now is how we behave under normal circumstances. Obviously, this year, they are not normal circumstances. The tourism industry has never seen anything like this pandemic. It's been highly destructive to the industry, and it'll be years before we get out of it. So what do we do as a state tourism office when we're seeing so many businesses going out and going under? Well, one of the first things we did was we went back to that legislature and we said, we need to get out there with a good, strong message and help out the industry. We were fortunate in that the legislature agreed with us. And so our plan was really, we were running a core program before COVID. When COVID came, we had to stop. We couldn't do any advertising. It didn't make sense. For the months of March and April, no one was traveling. So hitting them with a travel message would have been essentially just wasting dollars. So we pulled back that money and we saved it, and we're holding on to it for when we can really come back out. What we told the legislator we needed to do was a recovery campaign in addition to our core campaign to get people to travel in a smart and safe way, and that we needed to do that as soon as we could, really. So we were fortunate. We were awarded $5 million from the CARES Act funds to do a marketing campaign. We were eventually awarded another $10 million for it, and so we developed a campaign that's really, it's gone out and really talked about what people can do now. It's very different than our other campaign. It's targeted media. We've done it's almost entirely digital because it's really tough to market during this pandemic, because if we had any pullbacks where we had a COVID cases jump up, we might have to pull out of the market. We wouldn't want ads running when we wouldn't want people to come. So it's been a very difficult campaign to manage. But we've done it. We really wanted it to focus on who we are as North Carolinians, what we're all about, sort of what I like to call that esse quam videre motivation. If you don't know what esse quam videre is, Dr. Clark needs to talk to you more. That's our state motto. And I think it very much sums up what it is to be a person a resident of North Carolina. So we came up with a plan. We figured we were going to have different target audiences and media. This plan is largely focused in state. We typically don't do that, but what we've seen now are two really important factors. One is a lot of those local tourism offices that market to people in state. They don't have the funds they usually have to market it. And number two, we saw that just from our research, people weren't willing to travel as far. They were doing more regional trips, local trips. As I said, it had to be very flexible. So we've done mobile, over-the-top TV, connected TV, a lot of YouTube and things like that. I'm sure you've probably seen our campaign, whether you know you have or not. We've also done a lot of billboards, worked with the local association of broadcasters, the Press Foundation, and the Outdoor Advertising Federation as well, to try and get it in there. And we're doing some brand partnerships. If you watch the races coming up in NASCAR, we're going to have a themed car that Kyle Moffitt is driving, part of the Richard Petty group. And so we're really excited about that. We're working on a partnership with Circle K, and we almost had one together with Food Lion, but they thought masks were too political, so we couldn't get that done. We're also done a lot of media and PR with it, and this is essentially the campaign. So we really can't have an inspirational campaign out. This has been out now for a couple of months because we were still under a lot of restrictions as to who could travel, how many people could meet, what they could do. So what we came up with is it's basically a pledge program. It's called Count on Me NC. And it's a pledge that visitors can make and residents can make to say that they're going to travel in a safe and a socially distant way, and they're not going to travel when they're sick. They're going to do the right thing. But more importantly, it's a partnership that businesses have joined to say that they are going to take classes. And we've got NC State, we worked with the Department of Health and Human Services, and we worked with the Restaurant Lodging Association, and we got NC State to design some free 20-minute classes on food safety, food prep, general cleaning tips, staffing tips, all these COVID safety modules. So we've done 5 of these COVID safety modules, and businesses can participate. And if they do it, they become part of our list. We put them on the list of participating businesses, and we promote them as Count on Me NC businesses. So we've got over 5,000 businesses that are participating so far. We've had more than 15,000 people take the pledge to be Count on Me NC. So we're really happy with that. We've also had our partners in advertising use it and share the message with us. So we're real proud of that, what's going on with that. You may have seen our Count on Me NC commercials on there was one on the football game the other night. We've gone with a jingle, which is unusual for us, and an animated person, because all our stuff's research-based, and our research showed that people wanted to be informed, but they wanted it to be fun, and they didn't want it to be sort of heavy-handed or too preachy. So we've tried to get out there with a message about safe travel in kind of a fun way with a jingle and an animated character. So hopefully you guys have seen that. If not, I can show you some of that stuff later on. We also want to talk a little about what I think what's going to happen going forward. I think things are going to change, and we came out with we've had one real campaign since COVID, and it's called Cook It Forward. And I think this is kind of the style that you're going to see from advertisers probably over the next year, maybe even longer. So Cook It Forward, the idea behind that was that it was a charitable play on Instagram. We got chefs from around the state to talk about their favorite meal that's served at someone else's restaurant. So a chef came in and he said, I'm going to cook it forward, and I'm going to promote this other restaurant, and maybe a competitor of mine, but this is a great meal, and you should go and you should buy that meal. And they talk about the meal, they show you the meal, and they also reference Cook It Forward, and they reference a restaurant recovery fund that actually helps provide money to people in the restaurant industry who've lost their jobs. So this was, I think, a really neat way for us to get a campaign out that focused on, hey, there are great restaurants out there in North Carolina. You can still go see them. They're open. And And you can also give a donation to this group to try and help restaurant employees who have been put out of work. It's been very popular, worked really well for us, and I really think that is going to be the key going forward is are those charitable type of advertising platforms, because people want to do the right thing, but they're also being very cautious as they go forward. So that's our Cook It Forward if you guys are interested. We just did it on Instagram. It was a quick hit for us. So that's really what I wanted to show you guys. Happy to talk about more stuff or take questions or do anything you want.
Right off the bat, Mr. Witt, would you tell everybody your story? Where did you come from, and how did you become the head of tourism for North Carolina?
Okay, so yeah, that is a good story. So I did not start out in tourism, and I think many people in the industry don't. I started out as a journalist. I got a journalism degree and worked for a newspaper. I kind of saw what was going on in the newspaper industry 20, 25 years ago. Newspapers were not in the best of shape. Politics was getting really weird. And so I grew up in Florida, and growing up in Florida, you're kind of constantly surrounded by the tourism industry. So when I moved back to Florida, I got a job using my PR skills and my ability to write and do graphics, and got a job with the Orlando tourism office. And so I was very fortunate there that I got in there. It was a great learning experience. I worked there, did a lot with international publicity, and got hired by Universal Studios Florida as Universal was about to expand and add their second theme park. Got to work with them, got to travel all around the world, promoting lots of weird things like Terminator and also Barney the dinosaur. Really ran the gamut. And then theme parks are great, but they're really hard work. So I moved back onto a Convention and Visitors Bureau over on the coast, St. Pete, Clearwater, Florida. And then because I'd always loved North Carolina and we had lots of relatives here, moved up here to the state tourism office.
Outstanding. A question that we are being inundated with is, okay, how quick do we come back? And in my mind, there's not a super easy answer to that, but if you just break it down into the meetings and conventions, the sports, general tourism, tour bus, maybe 4 or 5 of those markets that you look at, how quick before we're back? And I know that that's an impossible question, but just where's your head on that today?
No, I think that's a good question, you know, and I think leisure travel bounces back as soon as we can, as soon as we allow it. Leisure travel comes back. Sports, I think, is slowly coming back. It's going to depend on if we have further outbreaks or not. And many of you may not have seen, but we are going to actually get the Maui Invitational college basketball tournament. The Maui is going to the mountains. Asheville is going to host that, so we're really excited about that. As you've seen with App State and those guys, football is happening. There's some challenges, but hopefully that'll grow back, and I think that'll come back next year. The big questions to me, these are the last things that'll come back, and it's festivals and events. And we just had a webinar on that today, because particularly in the fall, many places make most of their money off festivals and events. And I think festivals and events really are going to have to change. They're going to have to find a way to adapt over the next year or so, because people are still scared. And even once we have a vaccine and once some of these restrictions are lifted, I just don't think people are going to want to go stand in the middle of a big crowd at an apple festival or a barbecue festival or something like that. So these festivals are going to have to really sort of reinvent themselves and find ways to become profitable and still be effective next year and beyond. And then the biggest crunch to me are meetings and conventions and business travel. And meetings and conventions, sort of similar to the festivals. Not only are they going to have to wait for a vaccine, people are still going to be nervous. So they're going to have to figure out clever ways to get people to come together, but not feel like they're bunched together. And so I think we're going to see a lot of hybrid virtual and real meetings, or segmented meetings, where before you used to come and you'd have 400 or 500 people in a convention center ballroom meeting. Now maybe you'll have 75 in 4 different sub ballrooms of that convention center, and they'll meet, and the only things that'll be done together will be done on video to keep those people isolated. So I think that's going to come back, but it's going to be slower. And then to me, the biggest question of them all is business travel. Business travel, will it come back? I think is a good question. It's going to come back to a certain extent, but businesses are changing. Businesses are based on the bottom line. And I think if you told most businesses before the pandemic that they could do all that we've been able to do on virtually, they wouldn't have believed you. But now, because they've been forced to do it, I think we're seeing a lot of people seeing that maybe they don't need to make that sales call. Maybe they can make that sales call virtually. Maybe instead of taking 50 business trips a year, they can cut it to 20. Maybe they can cut it completely. I don't think you can cut it completely. I don't think it's going to go away completely. But I could see those road warriors who used to take 50 business trips a year, maybe now doing half of them virtually. And while that's great for Zoom, it's not so good for the towns they used to go and visit, and the money they used to spend on meals and travel. And this really isn't just about hotels suffering. The restaurants are hurt, gas stations, convenience stores, grocery stores. It trickles down across the entire economy. The other issue, I think, is that where tourism used to really make its money was on those busy events, on those event weekends. A hotel make 2 months worth of revenue off a big football game or off a convention. Those peak times, the industry was really good about charging peak rates for peak times. Now we can get back to 90%, but if the 10% we're missing are those peak times, the impact is more like 20% rather than 10%, because you can't charge your premium rates. It's been really interesting to see how hotels have tried to hold on to rates, and many of you may notice it. You can get some good deals out there, but it's still about $100, $120 if you want to go stay someplace, because the hotels are trying desperately to hold on to the rates. Because it's one thing for your occupancy to go from 70% to 50%, but if your rate goes from 120 to 75, that's a big double whammy, and it's really hard to get rate back. You can get occupancy back once we're out of this crazy situation. Rate takes a long time to build back up.
Mr. Witt, in chaos, there's opportunity. And last week, you probably saw in the Wall Street Journal, more new business startups going on right now than we've had in 10 years. I mean, people are starting new businesses in droves. Do any particular opportunities jump out at you in the hospitality industry? Now would be a great time to open a business doing blank.
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious ones are food distribution, delivery, anything you can deliver to somebody to keep them from having to go out. And I think we've got to find ways to adapt that to getting people out, but getting them out in maybe a safer way. So maybe it's you don't just deliver to somebody's home, but you're delivering it to their hotel, or you're delivering it to a park where they can go and enjoy the park, or that kind of thing. It's been fascinating, as part of the Economic Development Partnership, we hear about business relocations and business startups. And like you said, there are a tremendous amount of businesses starting up. There are a tremendous amount of businesses expanding. One of my biggest fears for the tourism industry is that people who are unemployed right now from tourism will go work in other industries, because manufacturing is up. Spending is up, grocery spending is up. A lot of these other companies are doing well. You know, Amazon's hiring thousands of people to deliver packages and things like that. So I've got this worry that you know, people are going to go to that workforce, and we're going to have a hard time once visitors are ready to come back. We're going to have a hard time generating the workforce to actually serve them. But I think there's also crazy opportunities, you know, that you never would have thought of years ago.
The doomsday people are saying 50% of restaurants, you know, the individual family-owned restaurants are never coming back. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that the problem is this has hurt high-end and local unique restaurants more than it has the chains. You know, the chains have adapted, the fast foods have adapted, they're built for this. The nice luxury dinner, you know, that costs a lot, that the local chef created with local food grown at the local farm, those are the ones that are suffering the most. And I think, you know, in some of those instances, in high-end restaurants, locally owned restaurants, you may see 50% of them go away. It's once again, I think it's going to hurt us in the long run, because what's going to survive are the Applebee's and the McDonald's and things like that. Those guys will survive, and people will be forced more often to go eat there than at the local place that's doing more for the local economy. So I think that's going to be a problem. There's going to be some hit in that, and that's going to take a while to get over. And it's been really fascinating, because we've run a grant program at Visit NC, and we've tried to help with the state. There are several loan programs, and everybody's heard of the CARES Act and PPP and these kind of things. A lot of that stuff just didn't work for those little unique restaurants. And these people, unfortunately, you know, they'd mortgage their houses, and they'd mortgage their, you know, their cars and things like that. And so when the government came in and said, well, we'll give you a loan, it just didn't make sense. A lot of them didn't buy on it, because they didn't need a loan when they still couldn't run a profitable business. So I think we've learned a lot on bailouts and what works and what doesn't work. But unfortunately, I think it's come at the cost of a lot of those businesses.
Okay. This is Mr. Wit Tuttle. He knows more about tourism than anybody in North Carolina. Does anybody have any questions?
I actually have two questions.
Okay.
So my first one is, you know, we all probably watched the debate last night, and I was wondering what you think the implications, since it's become such a polarized subject like COVID and all that stuff, what do you think the implications of the upcoming election will have on tourism in North Carolina?
I think they'll be huge. First, let me apologize for my generation and Dr. Clark's generation to you guys, because I really think our political system has just gotten out of hand and needs to be fixed. So I hope you guys are all engaged and vote, and not just vote, but get involved in the process to make it better than it is right now, because you guys deserve better than what's happening on a federal level, for sure. On a state level, I think it is going to have a big impact. Obviously, I work for a department that contracts with the Department of Commerce, which works under the governor. So, you know, essentially, I work for the governor, the current governor, who is up for election, and the mass debate has become sort of part of this election. So, from a tourism standpoint, I'm obviously thinking that it'll have a big impact, as our campaign right now is wear a mask, wash your hands, and stay 6 feet away from each other. Obviously, I think if we had a change in administrations, we would have to change that campaign. And so there could be pretty big ramifications as to the state. Now, you know, there are people on one side of the aisle that would say that'll be good, and that'll be the thing that helps us get back more quickly than before. But I will say we've done a lot of research, and our research shows us that people are paying attention to COVID outbreaks, and they're not visiting places that have COVID outbreaks. And not only are they not visiting them while they're having the outbreaks, they're not visiting them after the outbreak is done. So we're seeing a lot of damage done by trying to open too fast. And so that's why I think our state has taken a very cautious approach to reopening. Some would say it may be too cautious, and I think maybe in a couple areas it has been too cautious, but I think that's better than the alternative of having to stop and start and getting branded as a COVID hotspot, which would do tremendous damage to us, I think, for a long period of time. So hopefully did that answer the question, or was there another one?
Yeah, so I just have another question. It's a different topic, though. I mean, I know North Carolina is kind of like the home to NASCAR, and I don't know how much you keep up with it, but I know they're talking about moving the All-Star race from Charlotte to Texas, and I don't know, like, what kind of impact that would have, because I know it's a big event and stuff like that for the area, so.
Yeah, it would have a huge impact, not as big as it normally would because they've limited the number of people who can attend. And as I'm sure you guys are seeing in Boone, you can still have the event, but if you can't have the crowd, that's what really makes the event powerful for the local destination. Now, for the TV network, they don't care because they can still broadcast it and their advertisers are paying them. So what we're really seeing, I think for all sports and NASCAR included, is that even if the sport goes, the community doesn't benefit from that sport without having some kind of audience be there. So I think, the bigger impact we have is how quickly can we get people back in to see NASCAR races. That's going to be huge for us. If there's nobody coming, then the impact of moving the race away from Charlotte is not as big. I don't want to say it's not, because there really is an impact, because the people that come in that work the race, the officials, the teams, all those people, they spend money in those destinations when they're there. So there is an impact. It's just not on the scale that it would be if the crowd was allowed.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Sure, that was a great question.
Mr. Tuttle, you have a question from Rebecca Reese, and she wants to know about the job market next year for people like her who may be interested in working for a DMO or CVB.
Yeah, I was trying to avoid that question. I saw it, but I really didn't want to answer it.
I like to ask good questions.
Yeah, it's a good question. We did a couple surveys and found that I think about 30% of the destination marketing organizations across the state were cutting staff this year. So obviously that is not a good environment to come out into, because if people are cutting staff, they're not adding on staff typically right now. I will say that several of the destination marketing organizations across the state, and particularly some of the larger ones that have more staff, had reserves, and a lot of them have mandated reserve funds that they were able to dip into and help maintain their staffs and maintain their budgets. So I think there will still be jobs. I think they're just, it may take a while. I think you may also see too that this could in the long run be an advantage to students, because I think what we'll see is a lot of those DMOs that cut staff positions will look to hire back people on, but they won't have the funds to hire people with a lot of experience. So I think they'll be looking for younger people to come in and sort of, it might be a real kickoff for the next generation to kind of get their start in the DMO world. I would be much more worried about the 50-year-old, the 40-year-old person who gets out of work now, because they're going to command a higher salary, and that's going to be harder to find next year.
Thank you.
Mr. Tilley, any questions?
Let me unmute myself. No, I'll echo what Wit just said. Our budget runs on a governmental fiscal year of July 1 to June 30. So when we were formulating our budgets back in, late April, early May to present to our boards initially in May, we had no idea what the picture was going to look like. So I know myself with the Boone TDA and the Watauga TDA, we budgeted for a 40% shortfall. I think the Blowing Rock TDA budgeted the same. fortunately we have not experienced that. So we're actually up over last year in occupancy tax revenue for July and August for the unincorporated areas of Watauga County. So heavily driven by Airbnb, VRBO, the cabin rentals. The town of Boone collections are still about 25-30% down from where they were, and I think business travel has affected that, but it's starting to bounce back. So I don't think that we're going to be as dire, but unfortunately, to the employment question, we've not had to lay anybody off, but we've got a small team anyway. But I don't think that our plans include expanding in the near future.
Yeah, and I think Wright brought up a good point. We're seeing one of the most fascinating trends I've seen come out of this are staycations or workcations and schoolcations, which are two words that I hate. But what we're seeing is that people now can work remotely. And so what they're doing is they're saying, hey, if I'm working remotely, why don't we just go up to the mountains for the week with the whole family? And then the family can hang out while I'm sitting in the hotel or in the more likely the rental unit working during the day. And then we can go out to dinner at night. We can go do a hike, that kind of thing. So we're seeing tremendous amount of that. I talked with the folks at Airbnb. The amount of weekly and monthly even rentals were much, much higher. And even with kids doing remote schooling, you can go to the beach and be at the beach all week and do school in the morning and do the beach in the afternoon. So those are two really new trends that I've seen. So if you want to start that business, Dr. Clark, I think figure out some way to get the people that are doing the workcations and the schoolcations and get them maybe printer supplies or something. I don't know.
It's had a huge impact on the real estate market up here too. I mean, there is zero availability for to purchase homes. When a house goes on the market, within the first 6 hours, there's probably 5 or more offers at full price and above. So, you've got the people that have lived in the metropolitan areas, that their workforce has changed and they're able to live anywhere they want. And so, I think that the mountains and the coasts have benefited from that as well.
Yeah, it's true. I'm even thinking about selling my place at Sugar because it could be worth it.
Yeah, great time to sell. You won't find anything else right now, though.
That is true.
Wit, everybody here, with a few exceptions, are college students. What skill sets do you see as being important to getting hired in our industry in the next couple of years? When people get ready to hire, what skill sets are they looking for?
Well, I tell you, you're going to need to know how to do a Zoom call, that's for sure. Wouldn't have said that a year ago. But, I think a lot of it really hasn't changed. Well, I mean, that's one thing that has changed is you've got to be able to present yourself well on camera through video, which is different than how you would present yourself in an in-person interview. You have to be able to show some of your personality. You have to make sure your camera works, your technology works, that you've got good internet, because that's all things that are going to be held against you. Make sure if you're doing an interview and it's a Zoom interview, the lighting is good, and the dog's not barking and that kind of stuff. I think those are all new skill sets, but really primarily, what we're looking for, the main thing I'm looking for is enthusiasm. I hire based on energy and talent, not experience, because I think you can teach people to do things. You can't teach people to want to do things. So you've got to show that desire, and the fact that you're willing to work and learn and that you're interested in it, because you'd be amazed how many people we get that apply for positions that just really aren't that interested.
You have another online question down here about parks.
Yeah, this is a great question. So there's been an influx of tourists in national and state parks due to COVID shutdowns. Do you think the state will address the increased traffic flow, littering, and provide more funding for this tourist spots? That's Corey Lawfink asked that. So thanks, Corey. That's a great question. Yeah, I hope so. They need to, because we have seen that people are getting outside. What we did to try and help support that was we teamed with Leave No Trace, the Leave No Trace Foundation, and we created a program called Outdoor NC. You can go to Visit NC and just plug in Outdoor NC. You'll see there. And I'm a huge fan of rural North Carolina and the little areas. And I really see this as an opportunity to get people to not just go, to the Blue Ridge Parkway and to, Sliding Rock. But I get to see it as a chance to get people out everywhere, because if everybody goes from the city and they all drive from Charlotte up to, the same spot on the parkway, you're not fixing the problem. You're just recreating the problem up on the Blue Ridge Parkway. And so I think this is an opportunity. It's a challenge because so many people are getting out, and some of them don't know what they're doing, and some of them don't care. So we do need to have more influence on anti-littering, on behavior, the right behavior when you're out. Also safety as well. The outdoors are a dangerous place. Mother Nature is beautiful, but she packs a punch too. So all those things are important, but I really think it's a chance to get people to go explore new places outdoors. And that'll be good for the Boones and the Astrals, but it'll also be good for, for the Spartas and, and the Marshall, North Carolinas, and Murphy, North Carolina. I think we've got plenty of areas. The key now is to spread people out. That will reduce the impact. It'll also help the benefit, spread the benefit across a lot of these little communities. And so I really see this as a challenge, but I see it as a tremendous opportunity for rural North Carolina. And let's hope the state will do more to fund it. It's great to see the federal government's done some stuff for the Parkway and our other national parks. We have 13 national park units in the state of North Carolina, really all across the state. So the more federal funding those guys get, the better. State parks are a tremendous asset in the state, and they're a heavily used resource. So we really do need more budget. It's going to be a big challenge because it's going to be a really tight budget in the next couple of years. So we will really need to put a lot of support behind that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Some good questions here. Do we have anything else? Okay. Well, if not, Mr. Tuttle, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been eye-opening. We
Sure.
deal with each other a fair amount, and I have to say that every time I listen to you, I learn something, right? And it was really interesting today. Thank you for taking time out of a busy schedule to come visit with us. And let's give Mr. Tuttle a round of applause. Everybody, yay, okay, all right.
Well,
Thanks much, and come see us when you're up here, okay?
Will do. Thanks, everybody.
Right.
It's a pleasure talking to you guys. You really are in a great industry. I think this shows that this industry that the country needs and will use in the future. And let's hope we all get back to normal as quickly as we can.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right.
Thanks.
Take care. Godspeed.
Thank you,
Thanks so
Mr.
much.
Tuttle.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Hey, Dr. Clark, I got a question.
Yeah.
On our CVent project, do we just need to send the PDF of the certificate into As You Learn?
It's a really good question, and you don't have to do anything, okay?
Oh,
The certificate is for you, okay? And you need to keep a copy of it to prove that you have it, all right?
yeah.
But what they will do is, to get that certificate, you had to take a test, all right? And they will supply me with the test scores, and that lets me know you've taken it, passed it, and that you have the certificate.
Okay, cool.
that-
I had already, I put the PDF already on there, but
Yeah, that's fine.
I just,
It's fine. It's
all right.
good. Okay. All right.
that, sweet. Thank you. That's it.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.